Well, welcome back to another episode of the Reality Halfway House. Today we're going to be asking the question, can we walk on water? We are caught between worlds. This is the Reality Halfway House. I'm your host, Jones Nelson. Well, welcome back. Again, thank you so much for tuning in today. This is episode 8. We're going to be delving into some interesting topics today. And we're going to kind of juxtapose those with some of the esoteric, but then I'm going to kind of overlay some of our normal reality and ask the question, can we walk on water? Now, is that literal? Is it figurative? We're going to kind of get into it today. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, we are 8 episodes deep. I am very humbled and honored to be here doing this. And I want to thank everybody for leaving such insightful comments and reaching out. It has truly been a blessing kind of out of the gate. You know, I've been doing radio for 28 years, and starting a podcast or a video podcast, a vlog, whatever you want to call it, is really one of those things that was kind of a foregone conclusion, something that ultimately I've wanted to do for a long time. I've tried to do multiple times, and this has been a very interesting experience. You know, I think as this podcast grows, you know, ultimately my goal is going to be to get to a point where, you know, hopefully I can bring in a co-host. We'll be doing interviews and other things like that. But in the meantime, I just want to, again, just reiterate my thanks and appreciation for everyone tuning in. I'm so grateful and blessed to have every one of you with me. Today, we're going to be covering, again, like I said, kind of a swath of things, but I wanted to focus specifically on this concept of walking on water. And what I'm referring to very specifically is a story from the Bible where Jesus asks Peter to get out of the boat. And if you're not familiar with the Bible, let's go ahead and pull that up here. I kind of wanted to run through this. And of course, this is so small, I can barely see it. So give me just a second here. It's Matthew 14:22 through 33. And it says, and straight away, you know what, I'm not even going to try this. Hold on. I'm going to bounce over here. Matthew 14:22 through 33. Hold on. I got to pull this up so I can actually read it here. Matthew 14. This is a beautiful thing about on the fly. 14:22 through 33. There we go. And I just so that you're aware, I mean, you can pull this up in any Bible, but I'm on the Bible Gateway. And it's where Jesus asked Peter to get out of the boat and come walk to him. So, and I'm just going to read it so that we have context. I've been a big fan over the last couple of years where if I'm asked to look up a verse, I'll read the whole chapter. I'm not going to read the whole chapter today, so a little hypocritical, but context is everything in the grand scheme of things, especially when it pertains to Scripture, right? So this is starting in 22. It's chapter 14. It says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side. While he dismissed the crowd, after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and let me say that again. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. And then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So the premise behind all of this idea of walking on water, that comes from this notion, or comes from this passage that Jesus was walking on water, and he asked Peter to get out, and Peter sunk. Okay, it's not so much that we're going to delve solely into the Bible. I mean, I love the Scripture. I've read it cover to cover a couple of times, and I've been in it most of my life. That doesn't mean I'm a biblical theologian, a scholar, or any of those things. I don't claim to be. I don't ascribe to be. But I definitely do believe that it provides a lot of substance and clarity and wisdom in our day-to-day lives. So I just kind of put that out there. I'm not, in other words, if you're coming here today thinking that this is going to be some sort of a biblical lesson, I mean, it stems from this, but I just want to add context because we're going to take this and pull at this thread and see where it takes us today, okay? So the premise here of walking on water, I think, tells us multiple things. Number one, it really shook things loose. If you look at the disciples' reaction, they could not believe what they were seeing. They literally said, "Gee, it's a ghost." Despite having seen Jesus do all of his miracles and everything up to this point, they still in their faith had a hard time believing what they were seeing, right? I think this illustrates the point that Jesus was truly going through and breaking the framework of what we believe to be possible. He was breaking the realm of possibility, and he did that continually. By going through and healing people. I mean, literally, like crippled people, he would heal in an instant. Blind people, he would heal in an instant, turning water into wine. We see Jesus in this kind of archetypical role of breaking down the very foundations of what we believe to be possible. In the realm of science today, the concept of walking on water would be seen as more or less impossible, right? It breaks the laws of physics and buoyancy and gravity and on and on we go. And yet Jesus came and did all of these things, right? And so I think that that's really important. Well, when we look forward, Peter was like, "Hey, man, if that's you, tell me to get out of the boat." And he said, "All right, get out of the boat. Come walking to me." And he did. And for a second, he was able to stand on the water. For a second, Peter was able to break those laws of physics. You know, just a regular Joe, a regular Peter was able to go through and to do the things that Jesus was doing. Jesus later on, I'm not going to pull it up, but he goes on to say, he said, "You know, all these things you see me doing," I'm paraphrasing. He says, "You'll do these things and more and greater." I forget the specific verbiage, but specifically, Jesus is like, what I'm doing here today is not all that impressive. I mean, Jesus is one of those dudes that he didn't go through it as an ego trip. It was never an ego trip. It was always a very matter of fact, like, I'm going to show you that the limitations that you have in your lives are superficial. I'm going to show you those things. He said, but all these things that you see me doing, he says, you're going to do greater things than that. He goes on with the parable of the mustard seed, or he's talking about, he's like, if you have the faith of just a mustard seed, you can take that mountain over there and throw it into the sea. Think about that. What the implications of this notion of walking on water is so much more than getting out of the boat and actually walking across a lake, right? The implication here is that the physical world that we live in, and every single day that we live it, we're living within the constraints of these limitations. I meant to, as I'm saying this, I meant to go through and grab a scene from The Matrix. But if you're familiar with the film, gosh, it's, almost 30 years old at this point, right? There's the scene shortly after Neo gets unplugged from the Matrix where Morpheus is talking to him and says, "Hey, listen, all of these things that you're experiencing, or that you've experienced, you kind of got to let go." He said, rules are meant to be broken. And that's when he starts teaching Neo how to unlock or unlearn those behaviors, unlearn those limitations, so that he can start living within this framework, this matrix framework, in such a way where he can walk on water, he can climb walls, fly through the air. It's interesting because Jesus did a lot of these things, man. It's funny because a lot of people don't stop to think about this, but at the end, when he ascended into the sky, it's like, he flew, he says, he's like, at some point you'll meet me in the air. Again, I'm paraphrasing these things. You'll have to go look it up. Again, this is not a Bible channel, right? So Jesus came to show us what was possible, and said you're going to do even more things than that. And in no way, shape, or form am I saying that Neo is Jesus. But I think that Neo in the movie The Matrix is that archetypical role of this breaking down the limitations that we face. And that is the whole premise of walking on water, is understanding that the water is there as just another medium of anything else. Water is just sitting there as a potentiality, right? So many of us stop short because we view something as a limitation. Think about the first time you stood on the edge of a pool or a diving board and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I cannot do this. Well, why can't I do it? Right? Because you've never done it before. I can't dive in. I'll sink to the bottom and die. It's because you have put yourself in a position to where you have told yourself no or I can't before you've even given yourself the opportunity to do that. I have been guilty of this for so long and for so many years. And there are certain areas in my life where I have a level of confidence build up because I've done things, and I've done things that are tertiary or similar to those things, that I'm able to do it with confidence. They say that public speaking is one of the hardest things to do, and that people are more terrified with getting up in front of people or public speaking or singing or performing or whatever than just about anything. I think on Home Improvement, I want to say it was the TV show Home Improvement, where he says most people. It's like people are more afraid of dying than they are of public speaking. So it's like they'd rather be in the coffin than actually giving the eulogy. And see, I've been doing radio for 30 years. So getting a podcast, I mean, this is extremely intimidating to a lot of people. It's like, gosh, what would I say for 30 minutes? It's like my last podcast was an hour. And it just flew by. I actually had to kind of wrap things up early because it's like, okay, I gotta put a bow on this. It's tertiary to what I've been doing. I spent the last 21 years in corporate America. I've talked about this on previous podcasts. And during that time, I have my degrees in finance, and I've worked in that world. I have a lot of confidence within that world. I've worked in a lot of different areas within that world. And because of that, I can, quote unquote, walk on water in a lot of different areas. In other words, I'm able to step outside of the boat that I'm in, even in an environment that I might not know super well. So, for example, I've worked with bonds, like debt instruments, bond instruments, but I don't have extensive knowledge. And yet, if I was to apply for a job, for example, that is working in a bond department, I feel confident enough in my tertiary understanding, gosh, that's the word of the day, I guess, today, of the markets and everything else, that I feel comfortable enough to be able to go through and to say, you know what, I can figure this out. My confidence, my faith, if you want to call it that, is strong enough that I would be able to do it. And you may say, well, that's hubris or that's cockiness. I would actually disagree in that standpoint. I think that we're required to have confidence in order to be able to build our lives, to be able to build our individual empires, if you will. Right? You can't go through and accomplish anything if you're not confident in it, right? Some of the strongest people in this world have the greatest levels of confidence. And there's an old phrase that goes, and I'll probably butcher it, but it's like, if you're going to be stupid, you got to be strong. The Bible also says, even the fool, this is in Book of Proverbs, even the fool is thought wise if he keeps his mouth shut. Right, this notion of this perceived confidence. A lot of times, the most confident people are the ones that say the least. Right, so we have to understand. That that confidence and faith, and this is the correlation I'm trying to basically draw, is that confidence and faith really run hand in hand. But confidence can bleed over into cockiness or arrogance. So it's this really weird and delicate balance that we have to walk so that we're positioning ourselves in such a way that we can be both confident and humble at the same time. And we saw that with Jesus in the way that he carried himself, right? We saw that he could be confident, he could be aggressive when necessary. See, everybody likes to look at Jesus like he was the super airy-fairy, passive, peace, love dude, which on one hand he was, and on the other hand, he was extremely frustrated. If you read through the scriptures, this is not a sermon that you get on Sunday mornings, but if you actually read through the Gospels in particular, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, just read through them, you'll see a very different side of Jesus than what is preached from the pulpit on Sunday morning. He used to get frustrated with the disciples all the time because of what? Their lack of faith, their lack of confidence. They'd seen Jesus do all these amazing miracles, and yet when he was walking out towards them, their first thought was not, oh, hey, it's probably Jesus out there walking on the water. It was, it's a ghost. And I just find that to be fascinating. There's a clip, and in all of these clips that I play today, I'll include links to the full videos in the show notes so that you can go check it out for yourself. But if you've ever seen the TV show The Chosen, which I've not watched a lot of, I've seen a couple episodes here or there. I took a clip from that, just kind of demonstrating Peter taking a step out of the boat, because I think, especially if you're watching this on YouTube or somewhere else, getting that visual component, I think, kind of helps in the descriptive process here. I'm not sure why there's not sound there, but... Again, I'm new to all this podcasting stuff. So for those of you listening on the podcast, again, like I said, I'm episode 8. You got to cut me some slack here. I'm still kind of learning, right? But basically, for those of you listening on the podcast, it's Peter stepping out of the boat. He's looking at Jesus, and then he starts staring around and looking at everything that's distracting around him. He's looking at the storm, and suddenly his faith and his confidence begins to sink. Peter had confidence enough in what he had seen in Jesus in order to step out of the boat. If Jesus told him to do it, then he would be able to step out and he would have footing. And he did. He did. But then when he started paying attention to everything else around him, he began to sink, right? Well, where did this all come from? How do you go from, okay, I've got this, to I don't have this? You know, there's a term out there called imposter syndrome. And gosh, man, you know, it's like Paul said, you know, of sinners, I am the worst. It's like of imposter syndrome. I am definitely of the worst. Again, I've been in front of the microphone. I've been a lead singer in bands for a long time. It's like I have no problem getting up and speaking in front of people. And yet, after, you know, tons and tons of performances and hundreds, if not thousands of radio broadcasts over the years, actually, it would have to be thousands now of radio broadcasts over the years. I still get nervous and still get this sense of, man, you know what? I'm not worthy to be here. You know, I'm not going to be able to do it. There's all this noise, the storm that I start paying attention to, and the confidence or the faith starts eroding around me, and I begin to sink. This happens to us all the time. Well, where did this begin? Where did this lack of confidence and faith begin? Again, this is not a biblical lesson, although the whole premise behind it seemed... I guess this is not a biblical show, but this, I guess, is what I'm presenting today is a little counterintuitive. But I think this began actually in the garden. And I have to switch over here because I can't read it. It's so small on my screen. This goes back to the book of Genesis in chapter 2. We go all the way back to Adam and Eve, and I'll tell a story that corroborates this here in just a second. But I want to read from this. Again, Genesis 2, beginning in verse 4. It said, this is an account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, when Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. But streams came up from the earth and watered the whole surface of the ground. Then the Lord formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. So that's just kind of setting the table for the beginning, okay? Now the Lord God planted a garden in the east in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. The Lord God made all kinds of trees to grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? So we know, if you're familiar with the Bible, if you're familiar with Adam and Eve, you know of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. Okay, so basically, as we skip forward to verse 15, it says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work and to take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man, you are free to eat of any of the trees in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat from it, you will certainly die. Okay? So then it goes on, and God creates Eve, right? And he has a partner. So now you have both man and woman, right? And so we continue on and into chapter 3. I just want to kind of set the table with the two trees. You have temptation, right? A world really doesn't work, as I put my stamp on here, without temptation. It's like you need some sort of a pull, because without temptation, you really don't have any sort of free will. Because if you're not going through and have an opportunity to pull one way to the other, left or right, you really are more autonomous, or not autonomous. You're more of an automaton, because you're not really ever being forced to go through and to make a choice, right? Well, in chapter 3, this is Genesis chapter 3, it says, now the serpent was more crafty than the wild animals, and the Lord God had made, and he said to the woman, did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. Well, the serpent came back in verse 4 and said, you will not certainly die. The serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing of good and evil. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. So I wanted to kind of set the table with that, right? Because I wanted to kind of illustrate my opinion here. This is now my opinion, the gospel according to Jones, as it were. But my opinion here is that this is where we start to see a lack of faith. Remember before, we read earlier in Genesis 2 that there wasn't even any rain. There's this beautiful garden. It said that there were trees that were meant to be beautiful to look at. There were trees that had good food to eat from. And then there was this one tree that they weren't supposed to touch, okay? This temptation. Because, again, you've got to have this, think of it like a magnet. You've got both sides. The magnet only works if you've got positive and negative. There's a balance there, right? Because you have to be able to choose. It's so archetypical, in every movie. There's the light side and the dark side, et cetera, et cetera. They're the good guys and the bad guys. There's always got to be some sort of a balance, right? Well, at the end of the day, when they went through, both Adam and Eve went through and ate of this apple, they suddenly created within themselves two opposing forces. It was no longer external. Before they were on this road where everything was provided. God provided everything. The balance, if you will, was God, right? They existed, and God created and provided everything. God was the balance, held everything in the balance, right? They didn't have to water the trees. They kind of looked after everything in the garden, but it was basically, there wasn't even a need for rain. Water came up from the ground, right? But then after they ingested this tree of knowledge of good and evil, their eyes were open, and suddenly now there were multiple possibilities, this good and evil. Well, let's delve into that just a little bit. I would like to say it another way, and this is just me. Again, I'm not adding or subtracting to scriptures. This is just kind of my take on it and thinking about it from the vantage point of what really happened, physiologically, spiritually, when they ate that apple. What happened? Well, now suddenly they have this capacity for good and bad, right and wrong, different possibilities that could occur. This might happen or might not happen. Suddenly, they're taken from this balance that God had, and now there's this, they've basically pulled themselves out of it and put them in a situation to where now there's possibility. And now you have this ability to start kind of overthinking things. To really stop and think about this. If there was only one option, if you lived in a small town, for example, and there was one diner to eat at, you would just simply, if I'm going to go out to eat, I'm going to go to that one diner. Okay, but now suddenly there's a diner and then there's, a fast food joint. Well, now you've got two options, and so now there's a stressor that's in there. It's like, well, where do I go? Well, gosh, I got to think about it. And then you add a third and a fourth and a fifth. And now suddenly you're divided, and now life becomes a series of like, well, I have all these options, but now I've got all these different stressors. Now when you start adding different layers upon layers upon layers to that, your brain starts having to run all these different calculations, and the balance no longer belongs to God. It belongs to all of these different options. And these options, or the inception of those options, really, I think, became apparent or became available once they ate from that tree, right? There was this ability to go through and to no longer have everything work out, because everything just worked. Prior to this apple, right, or fig, or there's a lot of speculation out there about that. And I'm not going to get into that today. You can do your own research on that. But there's a lot of speculation. But suffice it to say is before the fall, right, they had one option, basically, with a temptation, right? But they had, and everything worked. Everything was in balance. And now they have options. And from there, just like cellular mitosis, it just started going and developing and spreading and so forth from there. And it's become kind of a cancer, if you will, in all of life today. Now, when you pull out your cell phone, I'd reach for it. Mine's on the charger over there. But when you pull out your cell phone, there's a zillion different options. When you get on there and you doom scroll, you've got option upon option upon option. When you go out and you're hungry, you've got option upon option. And it creates this like stress that's in the background of everything. It's continual. And you've got wars and rumors of wars, right? Constantly going on. Most of the time, you can't do anything about it. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, there was another, school shooting, or there was another horrible thing that happened. And there's so much going on simultaneously at all times that it's just overwhelms your senses. There's no way for you to be able to process this information at a level to where you can really participate. So you just stay overwhelmed, and you stay in a state of just like, I can't do anything about it. There's too much. There's too much going on. Okay, so what am I building to? I think that the process of going through and having that understanding of both good and evil, you have the good, to say it a different way, this is just for the sake of art describing it here, you have the opportunity of things going right, and you have the opportunity of things going wrong. But now that you have the opportunity for things to go wrong, that creates the opportunity for doubt. That creates the opportunity for fear. Because again, what did I say before? Like a battery, you have to have a positive and a negative charge. The good side of the force and the bad side of the force, right? You could always have the temptation, right? The temptation could never be, you can always say no, right? It's really until you indulge in what that temptation is that your life starts to change. It's like, well, I shouldn't, let's say, I'm just making something up. I shouldn't drink alcohol. And I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't, but what I'm saying is I'm not going to drink it because I'm an alcoholic. So if I drink it, then I'm going to spiral out. But the temptation will always be there. It's your choice whether or not to indulge in that temptation that's then going to create these other limitations. And then you have doubt. I'm never going to be able to get out of this. I'm going to be a horrible human being. And it spirals and on and on and on it goes. Okay, so then let's fast forward to where we are today. We're in a situation where life is full of fear and doubt. Jesus said continually, he's like, dude, get behind me, Satan, with all this like negativity and this talk of ill or the lack of faith. Again, everybody's like, oh, Jesus, man, he's such a pacifist. And this, he's just all peace, man. He was like the biggest hippie ever. All peace, dude, love and light and all. I can't stand that stuff. It's like when people come at me with stuff like that, it's like, dude, have you made it through the Gospels? I'm not going to sit here and point my fingers. Like it is what it is. Everybody's on a different walk, You got people that are drinking milk and you got people that are eating steak. I mean, it's just different things. Every time I read the Bible, I get something different out of it. The more I read it, the more I realize the less I know. So I'm not going to sit there and point my fingers and say whatever, but it drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. It's a pet peeve, if you will, when people are like, oh, man, Jesus, man, he's just so, love and light, and they try to take him in this, like, weird new agey direction, and it's like, dude, he was irritated, like, half the time. If you read it, he really was. And if you can say, Jones, that's blasphemous. It's like he made a whip, man, and it was like knocking tables over. He was a righteous dude. Go through and read it, man. He was the full package. He got down and washed his feet, washed his disciples' feet, and at the same token, he was teaching them, putting them in their place. It was the full package, right? Because he had to. But I think again that these folks were in this position with their lack of faith and everything else stemming all the way back to the garden, because now they have these opportunities for things to be wrong versus things to just be right. Jesus was basically saying, is like, dude, if you just have faith, man, it's going to work out. Like, it's just going to work out. Not that you'll not have trials. You always have the temptation. There's always going to be things that come up, right? That's part of the curse. Remember, after I don't have it here, but after they sinned, God kicked him out of the garden. He said, look, by the sweat on your brow, you're going to go through and you're going to work the earth. Like, things are not going to be easy anymore, right? It's going to be hard now because you don't have this paradise, this Eden that I created for you. Now it's going to be a lot different, right? Because it's like you can't exist in this environment because you're going to mess it up. I'm not adding words to God. This is just my take on the whole thing. You can't be in here because this is the perfect environment where things are balanced, and you're not balanced anymore. You're imbalanced because I was providing that balance. So I think today, coming back to the whole premise of this entire podcast today, this notion of being able to walk on water, again, physically speaking, metaphorically speaking, however you want to look at it, this idea that anything is possible, that if you have that mustard seed faith, right, you can throw the mountain into the ocean. You can walk on water, as Peter did for just a moment, until the doubt started creeping back in. I saw this video the other day that I got a kick out of that actually was almost kind of the inspiration. I was out, had to run some errands first thing this morning, and I had 4 or 5 different directions I wanted to take today's podcast. But I saw this video, and it was just, I was, kind of praying about it. It's like, what do you want me to talk about today, God? And I just thought it was really fascinating. It's silly, but I wanted to show it today because I think it illustrates the point really well.
3, 2, 1.
So, for those of you listening on the podcast, it's an RC car. It's an RC car that's out riding on the surface of this lake, and it's going real fast. And they're going for a world record attempt. And I'll put a link in the show notes. You can actually click on it. This wasn't actually the video that I saw the other day, and I looked it up to try to find it, and this was just similar. But the point is, it was an RC car skimming across the surface of the water. The one I saw the other day, it was this car, and it was just riding all over this lake and doing donuts and so forth. But the thing is, it never stopped. It never stopped. It just went. And I think that there's a valuable lesson in this. Okay, and we're going to dig in deeper here in just a few minutes about why I think we all sink. And I think it was very intentionally designed that way. So the RC car doesn't stop and question whether or not it can walk on the water. There's no doubt. It's a machine. It just goes. Okay, now the machine is being controlled by some dude with a remote control, right? And he's driving it around the water. He doesn't have doubt. He just knows that if he stops, that thing is going to sink. Because that's how the physics works, right? If you just stop that RC car in the middle of the ocean or the middle of the water, it's just going to sink into the water. Now, it may float, may have buoyancy, junction, whatever. We're not going to get into that. The point is that it's only going to keep moving and keeps skimming across the top of the water if it keeps moving. What did Jesus say to Peter? He's like, don't focus on me, or don't focus on the storm, focus on me, right? Don't focus on all the distractions. Don't focus on the doubt. Don't focus on the fear, the can't. Focus on you walking forward and focus on me, and you will continue to move forward. This car continued to move forward and continued to walk on the water, right? They show us this in the films too. Here's a scene from The Flash. I believe it's the TV show. Again, I'll link to it in the show notes, but it shows him running on water. Again, the same premise. He goes fast. He doesn't stop, right? He moves forward on the water. Keeps moving, and it's like, again, if he stopped, he would just sink, right? Because it's all about the momentum. It's all about the movement. And I think that there's some really powerful lessons in this, because all movement, right? All movement without thought is going to, well, let me not get ahead of myself, okay? Let's come back to the diving board example we were talking about earlier. You're standing on the edge of the pool, okay, and you're ready to dive in, but you've never done it before. So it's super intimidating because, I'm going to sink, I'm going to drown, and you stand there on the side of the pool and you think about it to the point to where you think yourself out of it entirely. But in reality, the only way to actually face that fear, because that's all it is, it's doubt and fear. It's this wall, this invisible wall that's preventing you from actually going forward. The only thing that is preventing you is yourself and your overthinking. But what is it how is it that you get over it? Like Jack Canfield, he's a motivational speaker and author. He's one of my favorites. He uses this example, and he says, what do? Do you go back home and make out a list of pros and cons of, if I jump, I do this and this, that, and the other? He says, no, what do? You're 10 years old, you just jump in the pool, and then you get over it, and suddenly you build that confidence, that faith that, hey, you know what? I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be all right. There's that old adage, too, where it's like if you're on a horse and you get thrown off, that you need to get back on that horse immediately, without having time to process it or think about it, to get back on that horse immediately. Why? Because you're going to develop a fear about it, and then you won't be able to do it anymore. And then you have to overcome that fear all over again. There's fear and doubt are huge parts of who we are as a people. And if we don't deal with them directly, it's going to prevent us from being able to move forward. And again, I think that this has been intentionally designed. And the way that they have gone through and have orchestrated our educational systems, our workforce, all of it, corporate America, I think that it has been intentionally designed. And you can say, well, your tinfoil hat's on too tight. Well, think about this for just a second. I'm going to play a video, and again, I'll link to it in the show notes, that I think articulates this really well. And then I'm going to put my 2 cents and my spin on it here in just a second.
Here is a perfect example of someone who didn't go to college and someone who went to college.
One bar, 2 Americas.
I'm not the brightest crayon in the box, you know what I'm saying?
I'm the second person in my family to get a bachelor's degree.
I'm like trash, ghetto at the same time.
I did move back to this area out of like financial necessity.
I love this place. We're a different breed out here.
I was finishing a PhD. I was working a couple of different jobs, and so I did move back in with my parents.
I work all the time, I'll tell you that.
I finished it over a year ago, and I've not been able to find a job and move out.
I work 6 weeks, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. That's what I do.
I have a book that's being published about neoliberalism and work.
What is it you do? I work on utility poles, lines. I'm an inspector. The American dream, do you think that's real? Oh, yeah. Is it anything to you?
No.
It's all about how hard you work. Real Yeah.
That social contract and how it degrades a bit is real. Do X, Y, and Z, and then you have certain expectations, and then you don't get the other side of it.
And are you enjoying life? I love life. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I mean, it kind of shows you probably shouldn't go to college, but what do I know, right?
See, okay. So let's break this down, because I saw this video this morning. I was sitting there drinking my coffee, and I was like, "Holy smokes, man! There's so much here." Again, if you haven't listened to the first couple of episodes, I have a degree, and there's that's a whole story for another day. I've tried to go back for my PhD. Gosh, I can't even tell you how many times, and it's like there has been a clear wall that has prevented me. That's a whole story. It's like a whole spiritual thing that, I mean, there's been a lot of really weird things that have prevented that from even happening. But suffice to say, I have a degree. I had multiple licenses. I worked in the financial industry in Wall Street for 20 years, right? And with artificial intelligence on the way, it's tearing down that industry. I mean, in the job that I'd been doing previously, we used artificial intelligence for virtually everything that we did. I was doing operational processing. And for the most part, it was doing well. We had to double check it, but then sometimes it was pretty stupid. But, artificial intelligence, if one thing about the robots, it's good at math. I mean, most of these people are training their replacement and they don't realize it. I use the adage, or of sawing off the branch that you were sitting on. And so seeing that coming from a distance, I did my best to basically get out from underneath the footprint of the building that ultimately I believe is going to come down. And I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I've got 20 years of experience. I can go back. But I switched from a white-collar life, okay, from that educated life, that gal that had her PhD. Again, I don't have my PhD. That's a whole different story. But from having a PhD and to the blue-collar guy, and now I'm working in blue-collar. I have gotten to see both sides of those coins, and it's so interesting to me, and I believe God is working on me in a very, very interesting way, and I think it ties into this lesson that I think that we can all benefit from, of being able to quote-unquote walk on water, having faith and confidence. So let me break this down. The gal that went to college, she had her PhD. She's got such a high level of intellect, right? I'm not going to sit there and negotiate. We're not going to get into political, all that stuff. But suffice it to say, if you really put in the work and the time and so forth, you're going to push or proceed into a realm of intellectualism, right? I mean, that's going to be on the educated side of the fence, okay? And that's where she finds herself. And because of that, she's now living at home and she can't find a job, etc. Okay? Flip over to the blue collar, okay? He's in a process to where he's working all the time, and he just works and he just does. Like he said, he works in lineman, so like with electrical poles, and he's an inspector, okay? And he said, I work 7 days a week, 12-hour days, but he says he loves his life, okay? So just to kind of put that in perspective, she seems like she hates her life, and he says he loves his life. Well, now I've worked in both worlds. And, I don't have a PhD, but I kind of consider myself more in the quote-unquote intellectual side of things. You may disagree, and I'm not going to fight you on that. But suffice it to say is I can relate more to the white collar because I did it. However, I grew up working agriculture, sheep and cows with my hands. So when I got out to the white collar realm, I worked really hard. My work ethic was very different from those that I worked beside. My one of my bosses told me, she said, you did the work of like 3 people during that season, that tax season. I think I did like 16 to 18,000 trades by myself. You know what I mean? I worked really, really hard. My whole career I did. And so that's not common though. That's not common in the white collar. Everybody's sitting in their 72 degrees. They're sitting at the desk. If they have to work past their 5 o'clock or whatever, they get, like upset about it. There's this weird sense of almost entitlement. It's like, that's not my job description. I'm not going to do that because I'm not getting paid to do that. And da-da-da-da-da. There's this sense of entitlement. I can say that because I lived in that world. Now, since I've been in blue collar for the last couple of months, the mindset is completely different. They have a very different. I'm apprenticing under a guy right now that has basically been a jack of all trades for like 40 years. Brilliant man. He looks at things and he has told me multiple times, can't is not part of your vocabulary. He's like, you just got to get it done. On Friday, we were going through and doing some plumbing under a house. And he was running into a quote unquote impossible type scenario. And he's like, well, I ain't got no other way. I've heard him say it so many times. Ain't got no other choice. Ain't got no other choice is what he said. Can't is not even possible, right? It's not even possible for him because he's got to go through and accomplish what he set forth. He's got ridiculous faith. In other words, his confidence in that area is extremely high. He's able to walk on water in situations like we were building a fence and I was like, gosh, man, I don't know how we're going to fit this in there. Like the solution was not even possible. I was sinking into the water. I was sinking in. It was like, this is not possible. I don't know how to do it. And in short order, they went through and cut a couple of different little cuts that took 2 seconds and they fixed the issue. And it blew my mind. Like they're just cruising across the top of the water. There's so much confidence and faith. Okay. Now, I don't know how much he makes a year, but I know he makes a lot more than me, and I know he does pretty well. And he stood up from being under the house, and he said, man, I'm so sore. My back is killing me. And I said, well, my wife is a massage therapist. I mean, I can get you her card. And he said, no, I can't afford it. He's told me point blank multiple times, you got to take can't out of your vocabulary. And yet he's in a position, and I don't know what his finances are like, right? But he's in a position to where I think he's doing pretty well, and yet he's got it in his mind that he can't. His confidence is low, and he's sinking into the water in that environment. So he's allowing his work to take precedence, but he's not allowing himself to then go through and to take care of the financial side. And so he lives extremely simple, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, okay? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of this. I'm just illustrating a point here. He's not going through and living extravagantly because that is his mindset, right? He can walk on water in terms of doing things that look impossible to me. And I've seen it over the course of the past couple of weeks I've been working with him. Things that look impossible to me, he goes through and fixes with, from my perception, relative ease. For me to do it would be, like I said, I would sink in the water. And then again, when we look at our educated folks, they've got 401ks and they take vacations and they've got nice houses and nice cars. But then when it comes to the implementation of things, they sink in the water. Like, for example, I have a 401k and I have investments and I have acumen in working with finance and banking and other things like that. But to go through and to build a house, I would have to hire somebody like this guy to go through and to do it because he has the ability to walk on water. And you can say, well, Jones, of course, we're all different. That's what makes the world go round. But here's the thing. How much of that is the way that it's supposed to, was actually designed? I think it was designed to work that way because they've shuttled us into a system to where you either adapt to it and you go through the educational system and then go to college and you take on those archetypes, right? Or you quote unquote flunk out, because the majority of the people that I've worked with over on the blue collar side, I'm not, let me explain something to you because I've been white collar for so long. Most people look at blue collar as being very unintelligent or dumb or slow. And I'm here to tell you that that is absolutely not the case. I've worked with some incredibly brilliant people. Now, they may not have the quote-unquote book smarts. Like half the time, you know, I'm a lyricist. Like words are kind of my kung fu. That's just it's the way I'm hardwired. And so I'd be speaking not just normally. I'm just speaking. And they're like, dude, I don't even know what you just said. And yet I've been watching them all day do these like miraculous things. They're on a completely different wavelength. They're walking on water over here where I would sink, and I'm walking on water over here where they would sink. And it's this division to where we're all in these different spots where we're walking on water over here and sinking over here, and they're walking on water over here and sinking here, and none of us can just have this balance to where we can just move about, right? None of us can. But I think that this has been designed that way. I think it's been designed in such a way that we have not been equipped to be able to go through and to function without something else. And I'm not saying you have to completely have everything locked down, but I think that it should be a situation to where you should be able to function as a pretty balanced individual to the point to where you don't require as much from anybody. Look at the Amish, for example. They've rejected so much of the rest of the world, right? And yet they function so well. They rely on each other, yeah. I mean, if you've ever watched the Amish go through and build a barn and move it, it's like one of the wildest things ever. But they're balanced. They can do just about anything. Can't doesn't exist in their world, right? Just like him, he's like, well, we got to do this. And I'm like, man, how are we going to, do we need to go back to, like, there's so many times we would run into something and I'd be like, oh my gosh, we can't do this. We're going to have to go buy a tool. We're going to go back and get a different thing. And they go through and they just and fix it. I can't. I sink in the water all the time because I view things in terms of I can't do this. And I think the whole point of Jesus coming was to obviously redeem us and to save us and give us the possibility of being able to exit this matrix, if you will. But I think he also showed us that the limitations that we put on ourselves, are creating this can't. And this can't is what allows us to sink into the water. But removing that and starting to look at the world in terms of can, you start to go through and have confidence, and that confidence breeds faith. And you can almost use the terms confidence and faith almost interchangeably. I have faith I can do that. I have confidence I can do that. But when we focus on all of the other things, like in corporate, I've worked in it so long. Again, I can walk on water in finance in a lot of areas. I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm not trying to say I'm an expert in everything, but I've done it for so long. It's like I can look at something and say, dude, that's not working, and this is how we can fix it. And they say, well, you can't do that because we have to get approval from here, and it's going to cost this much money, and we got to go here, so you can't do that. So you start to sink. And you're like, but wait a minute, I know we can do that. Like, if you give me, pull me off these other projects and just let me focus on that, and I can do that. Yeah, but you can't. I can't let you off of these projects. And so you start to sink. It's designed. On the blue collar side, these dudes make it's surprising how much money. I'm actually making more money now, ironically, than I was, working in finance. Not much more, but suffice it to say the possibility or the potential is greater. But these guys don't have the same level of education for the most part. Again, I'm not saying it's broad brush, but they're basically looking to Friday so they can soup up their truck. And I know I'm painting with a broad brush, but I mean that's been the experience that I've had thus far. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. If that's what you want to do, I'm not here to tell you how to do it. But they don't have the same level of acumen. And so as a result, they're not getting the balanced effect of being able to go through and invest and do other things like that. So we're all deprived of the other. And so we miss out on this balance. And I think it all stems back to the garden. when you suddenly now have this opportunity to be able to see both good and evil, a situation going good and a situation going bad, then you have doubt. And when you have doubt, then you're not going to be able to do it. Well, if you've only got part of the education and none of the implementation, or you have all the gumption and I can do that, but then you don't have the other side of it with the forethought and planning it out. It's like you've got the architect that goes through and builds this beautiful looking building, but they don't put into thought the actual implementation of building that building. I mean, I got to learn how to read blueprints a little bit while I was working on the education or the electrical side. And it's like, it looks great on paper, right? But I would have my foreman come by and say, see, that's not going to work. And we're going to have to actually do it this way to be able to make it do what is this, because he's not taking into account this, this, and this. Again, it's this division. It's I got the intellect, but I don't have the actual physical know-how. Or I've got the physical know-how, but I don't have the intellect. And it's like the way he does it will accomplish what's on the paper, but now he's going against codes because he didn't do this, this, and this. And there it is. So we're constantly in this process where we've been divided so much to where we have no choice but to sink, right? The storm is raging all around us at any given time, and we can't help but focus on it. And now our devices, the news, everything else is constantly screaming at us for attention. And so you can't help but just glance or be focused on the storm around you, and you don't have the other side of the coin. It's like you've got on one water wing or one floaty, and the other side is, so you're constantly imbalanced. So the question then becomes, how do you walk on water? I think the big thing, and this is the big lesson, is like I kind of start wrapping it up. The big lesson that I have learned now from going from one side to the complete other. When I look at projects that we do, I stop and think about them, but I'll overthink them rather than diving in. And there has to be a balance between understanding that, yes, there needs to be blueprints, but then there also needs to be that side of implementation. When I was in college, see, she said in her video, she's like, is going to college even worth it? Well, I had professors in college that were book trained and had no experience. And then I had those that were field tested and worked for years and then became professors later. The difference in their teaching styles was completely different. Those that just studied and went straight into teaching, they provided great, really pretty, squeaky clean, assignments and lessons and so forth, and they really gave you the background of why it should work. But the professors that had actually been out and worked in real life said, look, this is that formula, but I'm going to tell you right now that this formula it doesn't work most of the time. And here's why it doesn't work. And here's the implementation. This is the balance. These are the people that have that balance. And yet even those folks, if they want to go out and build then a house, they still can't do it, most of them. And I'm not saying that you have to know everything about everything. But I think that the big thing that we need to focus on in terms of being able to walk on water is to get outside of your comfort zone. Get outside of your comfort zone to the point to where you're going through and seeing more of life for what it is. You're seeing life in terms of the other side of that angle. Because until God takes us back to the beginning, until this event comes, whatever this event is that we've talked about multiple times, whatever that is. He told me years ago in prayer, he said, I'm fixing to return things the way they were before sin, the way they were before the apple. If you read the Bible, in Genesis, it starts in the garden, and in Revelation, it ends in the garden. And it's all been one big, long story that takes us from garden, getting kicked out, and being brought back into it. So I think until we're brought back, the best thing you can do to quote-unquote walk on water is to build your faith. And how do you build your faith? You have to build your confidence. And how do you build your confidence? It's literally linking hands across the aisle in learning the other side of that perspective. Because it's when you do that, you pontoon yourself and you create a balance to where now something that shouldn't float floats. And that's a look today. I'm going to end. I did a cover here in my studio a couple of years ago of 30 Seconds to Mars, Walk on Water. And I wanted to just kind of close with that today. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Reality Halfway House. If you liked what you heard today, like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you're interested in getting into all this podcasting stuff and doing that, hit me up. Again, this is the Reality Halfway House. Have a great day. God bless.